Yeah.
You ready? Yep. Okay, thank you. Erev Tov, everyone. This week's parsha, the Torah tells us, Vayokom melech chodosh al Mitzrayim, asher lo yoda es Yosef. So in that simple few words are a great deal of Jewish history, the story of the Jewish people. So the interpretation of Melech Hadosh we'll talk about in a minute. That is, there are two opinions, Rav and Shmuel. One opinion is that it was a new pharaoh, and therefore Asher lo yoda es Yosef, he didn't know Joseph, because he became the pharaoh after Yosef had passed away. And the other opinion was that it's the same pharaoh, but he changed his mind. He had new rules. And one of the rules was to enslave the Jewish people. So all the Meforshim ask on this second opinion, this would mean that this pharaoh lived a very long time, because the actual slavery in Egypt was only the last 80 years that the Jews were in Egypt, and the Jews were there at the minimum of 210 or 400, different opinions. So never, you're talking about a pharaoh that has to live centuries. So what does what is the opinion of the one that says it's the same pharaoh? How does he reckon that with reality and actuality? But the same problem would arise a different pharaoh. But the Torah gives us a hint here. Asher lo yoda es Yosef. What does it mean? Asher lo yoda es Yosef. He didn't know Yosef. You don't have to know Yosef personally to have been grateful to him for what he accomplished for Egypt. He built Egypt into the financial power in the world. He controlled all the money. He built it into the center of everything. Everybody had to come to Egypt. And he increased the powers of the pharaoh. And he established a system that would strengthen the government, etc. So how can it be Asher lo yoda es Yosef? He didn't know. So the Meforshim say that he made it as though he didn't know. In other words, his behavior is in spite of the fact that he knew what Yosef did for Egypt. And this is a pattern that the Meforshim say that repeats itself throughout Jewish history. I would recommend to you viewing the movie on Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. If you don't have a copy of the movie, you can ask Menachem, he'll give you a copy. Thumb drive that you can play on your computer. The Abarbanel writes in his parish to Shoftim, he writes a semi-autobiographical chapter there. And he writes about all the kings that he served. He was the treasurer for Portugal. He was the treasurer for Spain. He was the treasurer for the king of Naples. He was the treasurer for Sicily. And he says it was all a waste of time. He said, I regret that I didn't devote myself more to the Jewish people and to Torah and to study and to scholarship instead of occupying my time serving. He mentions their foreign gods, different nations. Well, if you look throughout Jewish history, you'll see that this is a pattern that existed in every exile. Wherever the Jews went, they strengthened the nation into which they were exiled. So Bavel became an empire, later the Ottoman Empire, and the Jews are the ones that were the commercial basis for it. Jews made Spain, they made Portugal, they made all of these countries. Then later on, the kings of Poland in the 16th century, in the 15th century, Jagiellon kings invited the Jews to come to Poland. They said, we need you to build up the country, otherwise we can't do it. And the Jews came and they built it up. The Jews were 10, 12% of the entire population of Poland. And many industries in Poland were completely Jewish. And that's a story that has repeated itself over and over again. In our time, what the Jewish contribution to the United States is enormous in so many different areas. But it always ends up Asher lo yoda es Yosef. Somehow that doesn't help. When push comes to shove, when there are moments of crisis and decision, then it's Asher lo yoda es Yosef. You didn't know. So in the understanding of the rabbis in this Melech Chodesh is to teach us that there always will be a Melech Chodesh. And that what we think is stable and permanent and beneficial and that will always remain there is an illusion. Because there always is Vayokom Melech Chodesh. And the Melech Chodesh can come centuries later. It doesn't have to come immediately after Yosef. But when it comes, it will be Asher lo yoda es Yosef. He doesn't know Yosef. He doesn't appreciate what Yosef did. He sees the Jews as a foreign element, something that somehow has to be dealt with. It's always called the Jewish problem. The existence of the Jews is a problem. And it's a problem in every country that they exist. So Golus Mitzrayim is the template for all later exiles as well. And that's why the Torah spends so much time discussing it and explaining it. And that's why the redemption from Egypt is a central tenet of being a Jew. Everything is Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, all the mitzvahs, to remind us. That's why it's called Zecher. It's to remind us of what the reality is, and not to delude ourselves into charming dreams that really don't conform to the reality. So it's not too cheerful. But if we know the reality, I think it's much easier to deal with it than when you're blindsided, when things happen that you never imagined. But these are not new things that are faced by the communities in the exile, and certainly not by the state of Israel. And it's all based on Asher Lo Yoda Es Yosef. Basically, it's ingratitude. Ingratitude translates itself to enmity. Chazal always point out that the worst of the midos is kofri tov, to be ungrateful. Because that measure of character defines everything else that we do. We are to respect our parents out of gratitude. We're to appreciate life out of gratitude. We're to make blessings over food out of gratitude. But if our basic nature is ingratitude, everything I'm entitled to, and you didn't give me enough. So that is the problem that leads to all of the troubles and all of the discourse that exists within the Jewish world and the general world as well. So that's why the Torah emphasized to us Asher Lo Yoda Es Yosef, because that teaches us how we look at things, how we look at the exile, and how do we look at our lives as well. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Rotzah Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Es Yisrael L'Ficha Chirba Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar L'Noch HaPei Simon Sivto Agil Torah